So the White House is about to reveal how it plans to test the world's most powerful AI models, but with much of the process kept secret, developers are asking one big question today: who decides what counts as dangerous AI? Also coming up, new research linking early social media use to lower grades. Is screen time putting children's education at risk? But let's talk about what's happening with the White House. We're joined by Dr. Karen Sutherland from the University of the Sunshine Coast on the beautiful Sunshine Coast. Great to see you. Talk to us about what defines a frontier AI model.
Well, that's a very good question because no one has actually defined that. So it seems the White House has now, and it's funny because we were talking about this last week about where are the guardrails, and this week they've decided that they wanted to call in the big hitters in terms of AI platforms to voluntarily give their new frontier model. So when a new model comes out, they want to actually assess it for 30 days before it's released to the public so that they can see if it has the power to identify any sort of holes in their security. But the thing is, they haven't really talked about what those tests will involve. And it's all voluntary. So the AI platforms don't have to do this, but you can see what's happened in the past when Anthropic had a bit of a stoush with the US government, and then they released Fable 5, and then that was withdrawn from public use for a while. It's all back now, but yeah, you can see, I think from what I can see, the White House is a bit worried considering OpenAI came out last week to say that one of the agents it was developing got out of the sandbox and went into Hugging Face to try and overcome a hacking task that it was set to as a test. So I think they're a bit scared now about what's actually going on.
So what is the point of all of this?
I think they just want a bit more control. They want to see, there could be a few things at play. They could be saying, look, we want to protect the public, make sure that these powerful models cannot be released. But I think it's more of a security measure for them because they want to see if these new models can actually find holes in their own security before they're released to the public, who will then have free rein to do the same. So that way they can actually test it and make sure things are fixed and legit before these tools are released more broadly.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about this. On the one hand, it sounds like they're trying to do something for us. On the other hand, it almost sounds like they're trying to prevent the growth. And it's almost like they become the kingmaker of AI, who decides who the king should be. And that's the big challenge here, right, is when governments get involved with technology, generally they're behind, and it can either stifle technology or it can cause the government to say, well, we want this for us and not for anybody else.
That is very true. And the thing is, it is voluntary, but it'd be interesting to see for those AI platforms who decide, no, we're not going to do that, just what the repercussions may actually be. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see the outcomes of these meetings and which of the platforms decide to follow suit and agree to hand over their models before they're released to the public.
Yeah, it reminds me of another topic I wanted to ask you about just on this one. The Victorian new Premier, Ben Carroll, has announced a new portfolio for the Minister for AI. I haven't seen this before happen in Australia. And his viewpoint and the reason for having a Minister for AI is both to understand what the government could use AI for, but also guardrails on this as well, which makes me think that's probably what it is. Victoria is I guess, the state of the lockdown. We do like the nanny state, and there's a lot of talk about nannying AI. Can a state do it on its own, though?
I'm sure those who are building AI tools will find a way around it. They'll just, if there's legislation in some state, they'll just go somewhere else if they really want to pursue it. So, yeah, I think it's a good idea to have someone responsible just oversee what's going on. But it should be more around trying to encourage innovation and seeing how we can actually benefit from it while looking at the guardrails and the darker side as well. But yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see what that job actually is, what it entails and what comes from it. Sometimes roles like that, they don't actually do a lot. It's almost like a nice to have because it's moving so quickly. The technology is advancing and what can they actually do? So yeah, I think it'll just be waiting to see what happens.
Yeah, unions are really worried about this, aren't they? They're worried that jobs are going to be taken. We're already seeing big companies making strides, at least blaming AI as the reason for redundancies and job cuts, whether that is actually the truth. Let's move on, because children are starting to use social media at an early age. They're now scrolling and scoring lower in school raising fresh concerns about the impact of screen time. So is social media harming children's education? That's a key question here, Karen, because obviously a lot of people are saying, I thought this had already been dealt with by that ban.
And this study actually came out of Italy. And so they studied 5,000 children just to see the impact of social media use on their ability to learn. And in this study, they found that children between 11 and 12 who use social media from that age ended up being, by the time they reached 16, about 6 months behind in maths and in writing and things like that. We're not talking about English writing, because apparently they actually improved their English because a lot of social media content is in English, but it's actually their Italian, their reading and writing skills in Italian were put back 6 months because of the use. They're not saying it's because of the content, but more around the distraction of social media, the checking of the phone, not being able to focus on tasks and really dive deeply into comprehension and things like that. That's what's really impacting younger people.
It sounds like me in the office most days. And isn't this the thing that, let's go back to us being at school, right? A few decades ago, everything was distracting. A bird flying out the window was distracting. The teacher wearing a funny outfit was distracting. The teacher being short was distracting. The thing is that students struggle to focus if the content isn't interesting, and the real world needs to keep up with the excitement of social media, I say. What evidence is there to support the decline in academic performance, though?
They measured their academic performance before they started using social media, and then a few years after they started using it, and that's how they saw the decline. And it was a trend in the data, so it wasn't just like one or two students. It was actually a trend that came out that was significant enough to include as a key finding in the study.
It's interesting, the social media ban now, it's been in for quite a while. I'm still hearing from a lot of parents, they're not really telling their children what to do. I've got other kids who are saying that even though they're 12 or 13, when they put on a little moustache or something and it thinks that they're 21 years old and it's happy days. And there's kind of the haves and have-nots when it comes to social media for underage use as well. Do you think the government will do more to try and clamp down on this?
Look, I just think it's very difficult to enforce. It really is. And
it always was, right?
Every platform's different. They're putting it on the platforms to stop it. So, the platforms, they're all very different and they use different measures and there's different things to get around it, as you said, putting on a moustache on. But I think it needs to be more of a holistic approach. So it's not just social media. If you're going to take social media away, what are you going to teach kids to do instead? How are you going to teach them to communicate and build relationships and things like that? What are you putting in place of it? And it's not just social media, it's also the phone. Like they can still communicate via their phones, and that's where the real distraction is, really.
Yeah, exactly.
I think
playing games, you don't have to be using social media. You could still be texting one another or whatever it might be as well, or scrolling the web 100%. To find out something happening. Talk to us about what schools are doing here, because we say that it's up to the platforms, but we're seeing a lot of schools actually banning phones as well, right?
Yeah, but that's been a thing for a while. In Queensland, that's been going for a few years, where students aren't allowed to have their phones in class. I'm sure they still sneak them in somehow sometimes, but yeah, that's been an ongoing thing. The social media ban's just added on to that.
All right, we'll leave it there. Dr. Karen Sutherland, always appreciate your insights on Ticker. Thank you.
Thank you so